for. Let's go straight back to that climate summit, though. Solange is with us here on set. We talked about it a lot earlier on in the French paper review, but it's also being talked about a lot in the international papers as well, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed they are, and in a number of different ways. Let's start with the Belgian daily Le Soir. The Brussels-based paper put an editorial on its cover this morning that says that with this, quote, umpteenth summit, governments and companies need to essentially put their money where their mouths are, that eloquent speeches and promises don't suffice. But whether or not they do that, the editorial says that mindsets are shifting for people, and that the world's populations, the winds of change are about.
And wind is actually the subject of one of the articles that you've picked out, isn't it?
It is. The magazine The Week has an article about wind and sustainable energy. It starts off by saying, watch out windmills. And it talks about a recent study that says that one of the greenest of renewable energies, or wind farming, may not be as good an investment as thought or as hoped. The study found that because of climate change, the world's winds are changing and that they are dying down in the northern hemisphere, but increasing in the southern hemisphere, and so if you are a wind farmer, according to the article, it's best to set up your business in regions like Eastern Australia and West Africa. Now, investing in sustainable energy in Africa is one of the main issues being addressed today at the summit. And Alla Africa, the Pan-African news aggregator, has an opinion piece today that pleads for such investments. It says some 600 million people across the continent do not have electricity, and the op-ed says promised investments in clean energy need to start actually coming to Africans.
Now, you've also found a real cry for help, haven't you, to stop global warming. This is coming from the National Geographic.
Yeah, a few days ago, National Geographic came out with a video of a starving polar bear. Now, it has gone viral. Over 1 million people have watched it, and it has created rallying cries to curb global warming. Now, it's been proven that melting ice caps are hurting the polar bear population. But, and there is a big but here, the polar bear in the video may not necessarily be the victim of global warming. It may just be old or ill. And that's the hypothesis that's put out by the Canadian paper, The Globe and Mail, which asks, is fake news okay if it's for a good cause? Now, the op-ed argues that such heart-wrenching stories can backfire because they take credibility away from very real problems.
Okay, on that note, let's turn to something else. US politics. Sticking with claims of fake news, though, the American conservative press are up in arms over the media coverage of Roy Moore leading up to the Alabama election that is taking place today, isn't it?
Yeah, molested by the media. That's the headline of an article today in the Washington Times. That's a conservative U.S. paper. It blames media outlets, namely the Washington Post, not to be confused with the Washington Times, for dragging Roy Moore through the mud. It argues that the testimonies of many women who've come out saying he molested them when they were young teens are dubious at best. Now, the more liberal site, Vox, decided to find out why many supporters of Roy Moore are still on his side, despite the numerous allegations from multiple women. And the writer, who studies the psychology of politics, says that many of Moore's supporters see him as sort of their folk hero, and that when you idolize someone, it is easier to ignore, quote, uncomfortable realities.
Now, the New Yorker also talking about the Alabama election, more specifically what it might mean for the Republican Party.
Yeah, in an article that's going to be published later, it's on the website, but in an article that's being published later this week under the title, How Low Will They Go?, Amy Sorkin wonders what the Senate race in Alabama has done to the Republican Party, which had been torn about whether to support Moore or not, but now has essentially backed Moore following Donald Trump's lead. Now, Sorkin argues that the GOP is willing to turn a blind eye to accusations such as pedophilia, and if that means that they can hold on to their two-seat majority in the Senate. She ends her article saying that if Republicans are willing to go that far, what would they be willing to turn a blind eye to when it comes to Donald Trump's behavior?
Okay. Finally, little something to get us ready for the Winter Olympics, which are going to be held in South Korea, less than 2 months' time now. What's this about?
Come February, when you are watching speed skating at the Olympics on your television or in South Korea, you need to check out the color of the suits of the speed skaters, or at least that's what the New York Times is telling us to do. In an article entitled, "What is the fastest color?" the paper says that for some speed skaters, the answer is a very specific shade of blue. The Times tells us that recently skaters from 3 different countries, including Norway, which has always worn red, showed up at the World Cup in this very particular blue. This created rumors that blue suits can shave seconds off of a racer's performance. Now, the Times says that is junk science, but it adds that if skaters even half believe that their blue suits will give them a faster time, then they may have an advantage.
Okay, well, I've almost got a blue tie. Stephen's almost got a red one, so I'm obviously a lot faster and on the ball than you are today, Stephen.
Well, that's always the case.
Well, wouldn't necessarily agree with that, I have to say. Thanks a lot, Stephen. Thanks to Lawrence as well. Latest news after the break. Take away.